Hi everyone, welcome back to our discussion. I'm a little bit frazzled because everything kind of broke down before, like the mic isn't really working, the internet is dodgy. So I have a gin, I'm all right now. I'm here with Claire, the lovely Claire, and
Hi.
we're starting a Dance with Dragons tonight, and we were just discussing the 6-chapter load. So we'll see how it goes, and then we'll decide if we want to cut it down a little bit. I was just saying to you, Claire, some bits of these chapters I found a little bit tedious. The Dany one I found a little bit tedious, I have to say. Just I think coming off Feast, I feel like I missed the Riverlands already.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there are lots of chapters here that happen way before chapters that happen in Feast, so there's a little bit of confusion around timeline. Yeah, especially with the Jon and the Sam chapters. And then we also get Tyrion is reintroduced again, which was a strange experience for me. I remember reading the first time round. Tyrion was always my narrator, if you like, throughout the whole story. So a character that I felt more comfortable and familiar with. I was, when you kind of reading the book, I'm just going to curl up with a Tyrion chapter. Lovely. Tyrion's one of my favourite characters. This book, I really struggle with Tyrion. But I also think there's another way of looking at it. I think there is another way of looking at it that makes it more palatable for me, I think. So, yeah. And of course, what we get through this book, through Tyrion's eyes, is an amazing travelogue throughout Essos. So, that can't be denied. Those chapters are fascinating. So I'm looking forward to those. It looks like there's a lot of Jon and a lot of Tyrion. So, but those two characters back into the story, which we have to get our head round. So, Gone are the Riverlands and Brienne's adventures and everything that happened in Feast. And there's a new flavour, I think, going into this book.
Yeah, and it's a very male book as well. So it already sounds different in my head when I'm reading it. I have to kind of jig things a little bit. But yeah, I feel Jon and Tyrion automatically, they sound different. Tyrion definitely does. Tyrion already sounds as if he's changed from Storm. I don't know. Maybe that's just in my head, but I mean, he's just killed his dad, so he'd want to sound a bit different.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about what you said about this feeling like a very male book. In fact, in Dany's chapter, it's almost anti-female, especially that when they're talking about the house that's all female and they're linked to the Sons of the Harpy, and it's, women will never forgive and never forget, and it is a very different stance to it. It's almost like yin and yang, feast and dance. Yeah,
because we have Dany mainly in this book. We've Asha, Arianne. I think we have an Arianne chapter. Oh no, maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking Winds again. Definitely Asha and Dany are the two main females, and we have the odd Mel chapter, Cersei and Arya chapter kind of thrown in.
Yeah, and Cersei doesn't come into it till quite, sort of halfway through the book, and Jaime as well. So
so it is very much a male book. But which is fine. That's no problem. It's a different. It's a bit of a I think because we usually take a week off between books. It's a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Jarring. That's the word.
Yes.
Anyway, I should say hello to AU in the chat and Sunny and Meridian. Thank you so much for dropping by.
Hi everyone.
We are discussing the prologue to Tyrion 2 tonight, which is the first 6 chapters of Dance. But as we said, we may see how that goes. We'll see. So next week we'll be looking at The Merchant's Man. So that's Quentyn's first chapter, all the way to Dany 2. And I'm guessing in Winds we're going to get a lot more of this kind of cryptic chapter naming like we've had in Feast and Dance.
Yeah, I think so.
If the contents gets leaked, this is an easy way to kind of cover who the characters are in each chapter, I guess. But yeah, so let's jump into the prologue. If you're rating the prologues, where does this prologue stand for you? Because it's up there. I think it might be number 2 or 3 for me. It's a great prologue.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think I would say my favourite prologue is Game of Thrones. Just as a scene setting, it was fantastic, intriguing, completely intriguing prologue that draws you in. But and maybe the Crescent prologue as well. I thought that was quite interesting. There's a lot in here. There's a lot in here, and I think it very much shapes a lot of character story arcs, particularly Jon and Bran. But yeah.
So does this happen before the Bran chapter or after the Bran chapter? Does Varamyr jump into the wolf after that, or when we get to the Bran chapter, Bran meets his wolf. Varamyr is one-eyed wolf, and he recognizes the warg. So is that Varamyr after this chapter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in Bran's chapter, it's after this one. Yeah, so that's. I think the chapters that are in this book are kind of chronological as much as they can be to each other within Dance, but there's a lot of confusion around what's going on with when things happen in Feast, and then when they happen in Dance, because it's like, oh whoa, Sam's still at the wall here.
Yeah.
And we've had an entire, feels like, life story from him in the previous book, so it's confusing.
And chances are that him getting to the Citadel may not have even happened by the time Jon is resurrected. Is that right?
Yeah.
If he's resurrected. But so he has this great line at the beginning of this, men in packs were dangerous, which I think is, because I feel like we're going to get a major kind of wolf man. I think you mentioned this before, a major kind of battle there, especially with Nymeria's pack maybe later. But the rules of warging, we've been kind of waiting to know more about warging, and he gives us the rules here. So you don't eat human flesh, you don't mate with a wolf, and you don't take the body of a man. And we know that Bran has definitely broken 2 of these already.
Yeah.
Now, what happens if you mate with a wolf? As a wolf, what happens? Like, do you pass on green seeing ability? Like genetically, is there any effect? Like, why is mating such a no-go area?
I think it's crossing the line, isn't it? It's that and he uses, well, he's thinking about, is it Hagar, who tells him that these things are an abomination. There must be a reason, or maybe not. Maybe just rules are rules for whatever reason. Maybe there doesn't necessarily need to be a magical consequence. I think it is just that here is where it would cross the line if your kind of spirit is inside another being, and through their eyes you can mate with another animal, eat a man's flesh, and just take over there are lines that are crossed. The seizing a man's body, there's a whole philosophical debate to be had there. And there's a lot. Every time I see, and we get this in Bran's chapters, he can feel how uncomfortable this is for Hodor, but he does it anyway.
There seems to be a very, very much a physical reaction. Like, there's a physical soul tie there, because eventually, like, we know that if you warg into a body for the last time, eventually your soul will be taken over in that body. So there seems to be a much greater connection there. I just wonder, does this have implications? It must have implications for Bloodraven and what he's been doing. You know, if he's been like sending visions to Euron or Ares or whoever he was sending visions to.
Well, I think there's for me, I've always really thought of this whole thing as being, oh, it's almost like a handy, practical way of like Bran being able to walk again, or, you know, you inhabit the body of something else, and it means that you can run, you can walk, maybe you can fly. You know, that's kind of one way of looking at this particular ability. The other way of looking at it on a slightly deeper level is this thing about it being an abomination. And actually, so you can look at this whole thing as this is either a gift or it's kind of a curse. And the ability that you have isn't just to inhabit somebody's body and be able to run or fly or whatever, but you bend that thing to your will.
Yeah.
So it's a power as well as being a gift.
I feel like, though, like
open to abuse. Open to abuse completely. Yeah.
Meridian is saying because it's messed up and you're overriding free will and it is disgusting. But I feel like there's more than just a moral reason for this. Like Varamyr ignores it all, right? And I feel like he's missing the point. There isn't a moral reason for this. I feel like there's a magical reason that you shouldn't be doing these things. That maybe it's kind of like what's his name, Voldemort and his Horcruxes. Every time he put something into a Horcrux, he lost more of himself. And I'm wondering, is there something, every time you break one of these rules in particular, you're going to lose a bit of yourself? And the implication being that maybe Bran at the end of this story won't be Bran at the end of this story. And it could be that George is making a bigger point about morality in general. Every time you do something wrong, it's chipping away at your soul, it's chipping away at your conscience. But I think in a magical sense, that's what he's trying to do with these warging rules. He's trying to say every time you break one of these, you literally are chipping off a part of your soul nearly. Or there's something.
Well, there is a consequence. There appears to be a consequence of it, especially the seizing the body of another man rather than another animal. That's seen as an abomination. It seems that the consequence is that wargs are haunted somehow by the humans that they've possessed. So, which would very much explain this thing that's going on between Bran and Hodor. And I mean, I don't know. I know in the TV show, big revelation, and like, oh, that's, you know, that would have been something if it is one of the three things that is definitely in the books that was translated into the TV show. But I think it's going to be something. I think there is going to be something really weird there with this kind of backwards and forwards between Bran and Hodor's relationship. And maybe there is an element of Hodor will haunt Bran forever. If something happens.
Hodoring in his head going on. Bran.
Yes,
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think, hi Connie, how are you? Connie says like they're wearing a shadow. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah. I feel like even at the end of this with Thistles, and I forgot how violent that scene is as well, where she bites off her own tongue and all that kind of thing. But where she's whited at the end, and that's almost, not that she had any choice in that, but that's preferable to what Varamyr was doing to her.
Yes.
That's like,
yeah.
That's the creepy thing. That's like, wow, if that's the option.
Well, yeah, I mean, somebody is still bending your will, whether it's the others or whether it's the warg.
But at least as a white, you're not aware of it.
Yeah. Although she seems to, well, he says right at the very end, the very last thing that's said in this chapter is Sixskins is what is it looks at Thistle as a white and says, oh, she sees me.
Yeah.
So that's like, but again, is that him just imagining that because he's now going to be haunted by her in his own mind, because that's a consequence of seizing the body of another man. Don't do it. It's an abomination, because if you do, you will never get peace after that. You'll be haunted, just like Sixskins is with the whole bump a lump thing, you know, that this is all it's in his head all the time. So
it is funny the way he looks at her and sees the eerie beauty. It's not just the White Walkers that have this beauty, it's also in the whites. Like, or maybe that's something that Varamyr craves, just this not having to constantly be the dominant one. Maybe there's a part of him that craves to be submissive. And I wonder when we get to when the White Walkers eventually cross into Westeros, will there be like, will people be so tired? Will there be so beaten down that it, like, there'll be certain portions of people that'll be just like, whatever. I'm ready to go. Like, this is, it's just like, and it does make me wonder about the nature of wargs, and he talks about how dangerous they are and how dangerous they were seen to be, and they were banished and all that kind of thing. But also where the weirwoods, I don't know if you noticed this on when you heard it on the audiobook, right? But he says, outside the night was white as death, pale thin clouds danced attendance on a silver moon, while 1,000 stars watched coldly. I'm sure you picked up the 1,000, right?
Yeah, I didn't actually. No.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
the very first chapter, the prologue, has 1,000.
Yes. And it made me wonder, because it sounds like whites are watching. This is what it sounds like to me. Or something is watching. He says he could see the humped shapes in other hunts buried beneath drifts of snow, and beyond them the pale shadow of a weirwood armored in ice. Now there's a few strange uses of personification throughout this chapter and Jon's chapter. This idea that, Bran's chapter, this idea that they're armored in ice. Almost like, is this a clue that like the weirwoods are also, maybe they're playing both sides of the war here, that maybe they just want whoever is going to be best for them, kind of thing. Because he also uses the tree at one stage to try and stand up, but it doesn't really work out for him. And there's all sorts of weird things in this chapter.
I think it depends.
Complicated.
I think that depends on how closely linked the old gods are with ice magic.
Yes, yeah.
Because there is a description later on about, I can't remember what it is, but it just made me think about, I think it's like next week's chapters, actually, the ones that I'm into at the moment. But there's a kind of description between something like the hottest thing and the most cold thing, and it kind of seems like those elements of ice and fire, and the ice magic and the fire magic, like dragon's breath seems to be like the hottest thing possible, kind of substance that you can get, and then you've got dragon steel that destroys the others. And then on the other side of the fence, you've got the ice the swords that are made of ice that the others use, that are so cold, so the coldest substance ever, that it just shatters anything. So it's that. So for me, there's a definition, between the difference between ice magic and fire magic. But and there's a close definition between like R'hllor and fire magic. But what are, how closely linked is ice magic to just things that are in the north and the old gods, and
Meridian says, I think the weirwoods have a lot to do with the process of creating White Walkers. I think there's something to that, because I live in a very cold country. I've never seen ice, like I've never seen trees iced the way he's describing them, right? Armored in ice, that's very odd. What does that actually mean? Does that mean like there's icicles coming down, they act like weapons around the tree? Is this on the bark? It's a very, I wonder, because we don't get that much in the north anymore after, right? We don't, except with Bran, we don't get that much about what's going on outside except through Summer's eyes, really. It's I'd like to know exactly what this looks like with the trees. So anyway, what else did you pick up in the prologue?
Just this huge issue that we mentioned before about wargs being able to bend will. That is really quite scary. It's a little bit like if you watch Jessica Jones on Netflix, the kind of big villain in that. Oh God, I can't remember, the purple man. I think he was. I can't remember his name. But that was his power, was to be able to just make people do things.
Okay.
And it was horrific, and you just didn't. It was just really trippy. And this thing hit the. I hadn't picked up on this before, but this element, this issue about wargs being haunted by the person that they've previously inhabited, and that's the reason why you don't do it.
Something I didn't pick up on before was if you stay too long, or if you only warg. By the way, warg and skin changing, he doesn't seem to see he doesn't make the distinction, but there is a distinction, right?
There is a distinction, but Varamyr Sixskins doesn't seem to know it.
He just uses
warging
is
inhabiting a wolf, particularly a dire wolf. Skin changing is where you're able to take over anything, animal or human, I guess. Yeah.
So he says something that I completely missed before about the prey animals, that you shouldn't warg. He says you shouldn't warg with prey animals, because then you'll take on the attributes of what it is to be prey.
Yeah.
Which I kind of didn't pick that up before, and it made me wonder, it does, like, it explains a lot with Arya and Jon and Bran, and how they're very different to Sansa.
Yeah. And the other thing with that is, I think it is in this chapter where he talks about winged creatures being the most difficult things to skin change into. He's thinking of birds, obviously, but with Bran, we're thinking, is he ever going to, warg into a dragon, which is a winged creature? And if he does, that it seems like that's going to be one of the most difficult things. So it would have to be something, he'd have to be pretty skilled and experienced. It's not going to be something that he's going to be able to do immediately as soon as he sees a dragon. I don't know, who knows?
Well, he does say that his death in the Eagle was the worst because of Melisandre's power, I guess, was so much stronger. That does suggest maybe a bit of a stronger connection between ice magic and warging, maybe, because she has fire magic. So that's kind of interesting as well.
The other thing is with Varamyr, when he's kind of like, he's sort of musing on his life and things, and he thinks about the fact that he's had lots of bastard runts, but none of the children, so none of his offspring had and showed any signs of the gift, he calls it. I see it as more of a curse, but none of his progeny. So that makes me think, does that mean that bastards can't warg, that they don't have the gift? You have to be true born to have this ability.
Ned Stark is Jon's father, is that a stronger case for that?
Or just that Jon is true born and not a bastard of whoever his parents are.
It does make it so unusual that all of the Stark children could warg.
Yes.
That's the strangest thing.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen? That's almost as magical, it feels like, as Dany birthing dragons.
Yeah, they all have there's so many things like, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, and is this a kind of genetic thing? Is it just like some kind of magical gift that's passed through generations? But George R.R. Martin has said that all of the 5 siblings definitely have warging abilities. I know we don't see a great deal of that with all of them in the TV show, but
He also comments on how he recognized that Jon was a warg. He wanted to take the dire wolf, but clearly Mance wouldn't let him do it. And then he says something about there would have been a second life worthy of a king.
Yeah,
is he referring to himself as the king?
To me, he's that's George referring to what the line is. He refers to Ghost as being a creature that's worthy of a second life of a king, which makes us think, okay, this means that when Jon gets stabbed later on, he's going to walk into Ghost and he'll be okay, because eventually he's going to be the king of either, you know, he's going to sit the Iron Throne, or he's going to be the king of Winter, or which, you know, whatever you believe. But I think that's a reference to Jon.
Yeah, it was kind of a cryptic line there. Yeah, and also why, like, how did that conversation even happen with Mance? It's like Mance wouldn't let him take the direwolf. That there must have been. I don't know. It's just a strange.
Yeah, it's a bit strange.
Barbara said Arya seems to be able to see through a cat later on. Does that make her a skin changer and a warg? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So we also get a moment that's really strange, where when he's dying, he seems to warg the trees.
Well, the Woods Witch, so we're guessing the children of the forest, what they say is when you die, you go into the trees and the earth. And what we get in this chapter is a kind of physical description of that happening to Varamyr Sixskins. So he talks about feeling everything and being inside everything and being able to feel how cold death is, and it feels icy, and then he feels himself like running with the wolves. So that's him obviously kind of settling into his second life, which is his true death.
And he has all the unsettling children on his back.
It's
such a creepy chapter.
It is. It's very creepy. It's very creepy.
There's so much to unpack in it as well.
It tells us a lot more about warging abilities and the kind of do's and don'ts of wargship.
It gives me hope that maybe George will be able to give Jon chapters, because Varamyr has certainly given us what life is like in the afterlife for a brief moment, but it's so disjointed and full of symbolism, and it jumps around so much, and it can be incoherent. I don't know how rewarding that will be. I still don't think we will get Jon chapters, but if we will, it'll probably be something like the end of this Varamyr chapter for a bit anyway.
But I mean, we have had with the dreams with the Stark children, them having wolf dreams, so we know what that's like. I think there could be a couple of chapters where it just seems like a wolf dream, but there's just a bit more awareness there, maybe, and maybe we start to see the battle of wills between Ghost and Jon.
If we do, it'll be interesting, because it won't be able to. It's not an indefinite thing. It just depends on how far Jon will come back, like how much of Jon will come back, because wolf dreams are fun and everything, but they don't give you any narrative. There's no narrative there apart beyond the character, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So But anything else then in the prologue that you want to discuss?
No.
Okay, it's a long prologue, but anyway, we're into Tyrion. We haven't had Tyrion for a while, and we're making up to it tonight for 2 Tyrion chapters. I have one question for you, Claire. Where do whores go?
Oh, poor Tyrion. I don't know. I mean, that's goes with my question, which is, will Tyrion ever see Tysha?
I think he has to, right?
I think if he doesn't see her, he'll see. I mean, there's that wonderful theory that Penny and Groat were somehow Tyrion's children with Tysha. and that the penny and groat is the, you know, links to the lowest denomination and the, you know, Lannister gold kind of thing. So that's, which I love it. I love that theory. But I don't know whether that's going to be true. If it is, I don't know, maybe Tyrion will see elements of Tysha, or we'll have some tantalizing near misses, or where we think, I don't know, she could be in one of the, you know, brothels in Bravos, or in Lys, or wherever. But I don't know. Where do you think Hawes go?
I don't know, but I think it could be that, like, Tyrion will have an answer at the end and he'll be able to find her. But I don't know. I don't know if he deserves the answer, to be honest. Yeah, I'm very torn on this whole Tysha thing. It feels like he's just, and I mean, apart from that, he's also homicidal when it comes to Cersei, which is even more kind of disturbing to read than anything else. I heard a theory during the week that Cersei's children are Tyrions. Did you know that this was the thing in the fandom?
No.
I have no idea where that, I don't know how people come up with that, but yeah, that's the thing that's out there. Yeah, it's very strange. But yeah, so Varys is not at all shocked that he killed Tywin when Tyrion tells him, and just says very kind of nonchalantly, "You should never have climbed that ladder." So I wonder, was there a double meaning here in "you should never have climbed the political ladder"? You should have stayed off Littlefinger's ladder and my ladder, and just like, we didn't need someone with your brains meddling. Which lends some sort of credence to the theories out there that perhaps it was Littlefinger or Varys trying to take out Tyrion at Joffrey's wedding, not kill Tyrion himself. So that there might be something to that. But yeah, he's not shocked at all. And yeah, he feels like they're hit with a storm because of his kinslaying as well. But yeah, I don't really know if I have very much here. Oh yeah, just Illyrio with the staff, that they would never refuse you. Like, he says that they would never refuse you sex. None of my staff will ever refuse you sex. Like, as in, like, they know who you are and they know how important you are. It was a weird line. I don't know if there's anything more to that. It's said a couple of times.
Cat, sorry, I'm just going to have to let the cat out. Just give me 1 second.
Those Lannisters are always causing trouble. Yeah, I don't know if anyone in the chat has anything for that, but it was just a kind of a weird thing that Illyrio kept saying. The other thing that I never realized was that this whole thing with Tyrion and Tysha actually took place during the Fall Spring. And the Fall Spring is when the tourney of Harrenhal happens. It's where we assume Lyanna and Rhaegar meet for the first time. It's where Ashara Dane and everything happens there with Ned and all that kind of thing. So that kind of somewhat explains why Tyrion wasn't at Harrenhal, I guess. Sorry, Claire, I was just reading that this is kind of, I never really put this together before, but the fact that the whole thing with Tysha and Tyrion actually took place during the Fall Spring, which is why he's not Harrenhal. So it may be just a useful way for George to be able to keep that character out of Harrenhal, the whole thing, and keep him preoccupied with Tysha, because then Tyrion, as one of our main narrators from like the old generation, he never has to think about Ashara Dane or Lyanna or Rhaegar, because that point in his life is very focused on Tysha. So it might be just kind of a little narrative loophole for George with Tyrion in a way.
Yeah, just a distraction to keep him away from the truth. Yeah.
So it never even occurred to me to ask where Tyrion was at that stage, but that makes sense now. So then
it all seems, it's a bit dreamlike, isn't it? Everything, when he remembers all of that, it's almost like, did any of that actually happen? Was it all in his head? It's so weird.
Yeah, it is really weird. So it also seems like, because we talked about this before, that the memory of this is a bit false, because in the last time we saw him, I think in Storm, he had this whole thing where, was it Storm or Clash? He talked about how, oh, when he'd come home in the evening, this is what they do, and they had their little routine, which made it sound like it went on for months, that it wasn't just, you know, like I feel like in a Game of Thrones we're led to believe that it's a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of days that they're actually married. But when we hear about this story again, it feels like they've been together months. Like he's misremembered a lot. And for the false spring, I mean, Jaime was definitely at Harrenhal. So Jaime had to be able to come from Harrenhal back to wherever this happened with Tysha and Tyrion. Was it near Castle Rock? I think it was.
Yeah.
And or it was somewhere in the Westerlands. So there had to have been some time. This marriage lasted for a lot longer, maybe, than Tyrion was willing to admit earlier on in the series. I guess because he didn't want to remember her. But now it's all kind of coming out and coming back to him, maybe. But yeah, just then just a lot of stuff about
false spring of a marriage. It's a strange kind of phrase to put in there, isn't it? With that, with him remembering that, it's really odd. I mean, I think for me, this is when he arrives in Pentos, and so his character's very different. We get again. It was a shock to me because it was like, oh yeah, Tyrion. Oh God, what's this? You know, and he seems very bitter, very snarky, very kind of like angry, entitled, kind of, you know, but at the same time, that's a pretty traumatic experience that he's been through. Again, almost like Jaime, it's sort of like PTSD kind of thing. And I know, you know, that Jaime's a warrior. PTSD isn't really a kind of thing that would exist in that context, but he has. I suppose I had to sort of stop and think, rather than, oh, this is a Tyrion that this is a character that I don't recognize anymore. I'm not familiar with this side of his personality. I don't like it. I just have to kind of get over that and think he's changed because he's been through some horrible traumatic experiences. And as annoying as it is that he keeps repeating that, where the whores go, where the whores go, where the whores go. It's you know.
I mean, he has just killed his dad. So.
Exactly. He's kind of, you know, he's living with the after effects of all of that.
Connie asks, but wasn't Jaime with Tyrion though? Yeah, that's the thing. He was with Tyrion, but he was also
with
Harrenhal. Yeah. So he was also a Harrenhal, which at some stage Jaime, I don't think we know if Jaime was there when all the soldiers were allowed to rape Tysha. I don't know if he was there for that, but he was definitely at Harrenhal. That's where he was knighted, Jaime. So this relationship, it lasted a lot longer, and Meridian points out that maybe they're planted memories, that maybe there's something. Connie's wondering, is there a glass candle going on, or Meridian says blood raven, or I don't know. I feel like she's real, but there's definitely something not quite right about it. I don't know. So the only other thing that I have here is that he very much I am a lion, I'll always be a lion, I'm a Lannister. Yes. Him coming to the realization that to Queen Marcella is to kill her. And the other thing, just that the dragon with 3 heads is the savior for Illyrio, but I wasn't really sure who the 3 heads are for Illyrio. Dany and Aegon, or Fagon. Well, who's the third for him?
Maybe it is Tyrion. Maybe that's why Tyrion's there. We're given to believe through the eyes of this character as the reader that Tyrion's now off on a new adventure in Essos. He's exiled. He can't go, but he's banished. Cersei will give a lordship to anyone who'll bring his head. So off he goes on these amazing adventures, and we get to see Volantis, etc., through Tyrion's eyes. but making it seem as though this is self-determination from Tyrion, but he's a puppet for somebody. So he's definitely, his strings are being pulled from. It was engineered that he killed his father. I'm certain of that.
Totally. Yeah.
And I don't think I suppose my question is, how do Varys and Illyrio plan to make the best use of Tyrion? And is it as the third head of the dragon, or is it just as he's quite slick politically so he can encourage Daenerys to come back? I mean, you'd have to know what their plans were, but certainly to me, it seems like part of that is they've got... Tyrion seems to like to think that he understands the Game of Thrones and where people are being placed, but I think this is happening to him, and it probably has been for quite a long time if he's had people like Shay and Bronn foisted on him in his character development and story arc.
True.
Yeah, I don't think any of this stuff has happened by chance, and it could be Varys and Illyrio. It could have had something to do with his father.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if Varys, the Master of Whispers, has orchestrated this whole thing with Illyrio based on the assumption that Tyrion is not Tywin's son, that he's a Targaryen, only to have it turn out to be false information. That the key whisper that Varys depended on.
Yeah.
Wrong. That would be brilliant. That would really, and be very George as well.
Well, something has to backfire, doesn't it, massively on either Littlefinger or Varys. It's just got to.
And on both of them, that would be a brilliant way for this to backfire on him, because I think Tyrion, out and out Lannister, straight to the bone. Even Tywin dies thinking that Tyrion may not be his. He says it, "You're not my son." He probably assumed he wasn't his. I still think that it's far more likely that Cersei and Jaime are Targaryen than Tyrion for me.
Yeah.
Or they're all
he
Lannister.
Says there's a very interesting exchange between when they have the dinner, when Tyrion and Illyrio have the dinner in Illyrio's manse, and he says, so there's this issue where Tyrion's paranoid that these mushrooms are like some sort of suicide mushrooms, and that Illyrio's trying to kill him, and he's talking about he gives him Illyrio's telling him the history of his friendship with Varys, and how Varys was taken over to Westeros, and how Tywin comes into the story and everything, and Tyrion's completely paranoid that, like, oh my god, he's going to kill me, and he's telling me to eat these mushrooms. Turns out that they're not, but and I suppose this is Tyrion is on this self-destructive mode, post-traumatic kind of thing that he's been through. So he's sitting there feeling pretty suicidal and thinking, this is the moment where he has to decide whether or not he has a purpose, any purpose, or whether he just gives up. He's not the entitled Lannister anymore. He's pretty much on the run. So he's thinking to himself, I'm still a lion, I'm still a lion, I'm still a lion, I'm a lion still. And he's also very precious about what other people say about his family. So I think absolutely he's a Lannister through and through. But he doesn't know what his purpose is. Somebody else is pulling his strings, and as readers, we get to see how this unfolds through Tyrion's eyes, through his point of view chapters.
Connie does point out that Tyrion has super blonde hair like Tarek hair. He does, yeah. I think there's a lot of people in the books with super blonde hair. For the Targaryen look, I feel like you need to be looking out for the almost silver blonde, right? Maybe. Yeah. That's what I don't know. I could be wrong, Connie. And Meridian says, I think Tyrion is nowhere near as clever as he thinks he is. I agree, and I would say Tywin falls into that category as well. I think Tywin sorely underestimated Aerys. He sorely underestimated Joanna. He sorely underestimated Cersei's ability to be power hungry and stupid. He underestimated Jaime's ability to completely undercut him and disinherit himself, and he underestimated most of all Tyrion. So yeah, I think the apple didn't fall very far from the tree.
No. I think there's another couple of things here for me. I think that statue is significant.
Yeah, me too. What he said, that was something to do with his younger days in the next chapter, right?
Yeah. It's a painted statue, so much so that it looks lifelike. And it's of a Braavosi boy. And we get to find out later on that is Illyrio. So I think there is some significance to who Illyrio is, and how him and Varys know each other. And I don't know, there's something to that. And there's also several mentions, like over the top mentions of cherry trees. Through it, Tyrion's kind of, he's kind of checking out the manse and the gardens and everything, and we get to see that through this chapter. But there's an awful lot of, I don't know, just thought it was a random thing. There's an awful lot of mention of cherry trees.
There's a lot of this is going to sound weird, and it probably is nothing to do with anything, but there's a lot of mentions to like food that's round and that is small enough to eat, like with like it's all to represent
chestnuts, mushrooms,
mushrooms, snails later on as well. Like everything is really round and dainty. There's almost something gluttonous. There is something gluttonous about it, but it's like grotesquely sexual in a way. It's really weird. It's really really strange with him. And also the smell of him and everything, and the way he just produces roast chestnuts. By the way, cold roast chestnuts sounds gross.
Yeah, no, it does.
Garlic snails and stuff, cold. Ugh.
Yeah. But my other question is those mushrooms, those other mushrooms that are poisonous, that Tyrion stored away in his sock. They're mentioned a few times throughout the rest of this book. Will they ever be used?
Well, could that be something that a queen could choke on?
Yeah.
Remember I was saying the Cersei prophecy might not be about her being strangled. It might be about her being choked. So would those mushrooms lead to a choking? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, but they're definitely, they are poisonous, and he's he's got them. He's mentioned them a few times throughout the book. I'm fairly certain they're going to be used. I'm just trying to figure out how. Maybe even against Daenerys later on down the line. I don't know. What was the other thing?
Meridian wonders, could the sword Blackfire be hidden in plain sight in the statue? Potentially.
Yes.
The next time. So maybe if there's some way that Tyrion returns and the sword isn't on the statue, perhaps. Maybe I don't remember a sword on the statue. I presume there was one, right? But, it could be Meridian. It's a good idea. Very good idea.
It was very lifelike, like extraordinarily so. Just the other thing to mention about the change in Tyrion's character is that this kind of loss of libido, and him seeming kind of lovesick, both over Shay and the memory of Tysha. So obviously, that's going to be fueling the rest of his development throughout this book. Is he's changed. He's kind of like, I'm not interested anymore. I mean, he's horrible to that girl. I think that's later on in the next chapter. I'm getting mixed up with chapters now, but he seems to have this like loss of libido.
Yeah, maybe that's where we're getting all the references to cherries and snails and stuff like that. But yeah, so then we are into a chapter that was a little bit tedious for me, I have to say, this week. And I say that with the utmost respect to George. But I do find I'm getting, with the Dany storyline, I feel like because I love Feast so much and I really enjoy being in the Riverlands and I love that kind of thing. It's just with the Dany storyline, I guess I'm the only purpose I can see for that storyline is that it's teaching her how to be a queen, or maybe it's giving us tropes to look out for in Westeros later. I'm struggling not to see the point of it, but maybe I am.
Well, my it's funny because the question that I've got, the main question that I've got for this Dany chapter is exactly the same as the next question that I have for Jon's chapter, which is Dany making the right decisions regarding the masters and the ex-slaves, and is she sending the right messages out to people? I mean, she is, you know, she's kind of like queen in training. She's using Meereen as a training ground for what before she goes back to Westeros, I think. But so she thinks about some things politically, like she thinks about how she would probably marry Aegon if he'd have lived, which is interesting because, you know, she could be running into him fairly soon. She thinks about how she wonders why the Meereenese are so untrusting of her and so like guarded with her. And it's like, because you killed 163 of the masters and just pinned them up in the plaza until maggots and flies kind of, you know, horrific. And I know that again, that's that kind of young girl reaction to the slave children pointing the way to, was it Astapor? I think it was.
Yeah.
But I just politically, this idea of, and I know that we've mentioned this before in way back in Dany chapters when she started with this kind of like tendency of breaking chains, is the slave trade, as horrific as it is as a concept, is an economy. And if you remove something without having anything in its place that people rely on as an economy, and you get all these weird kind of case studies in these chapters of these slaves that are now have become the masters, and the ex-masters have become the slaves, and these freed slaves that are actually gone crawling back to the masters because they actually had a better life and more of an income and, in a sense, more freedom in the situation that they were in when they were enslaved. There's a whole load of layers of just history and heavy politics that go into trying to dismantling a system like that. So I don't think she is necessarily making the right decisions. I think where she is at the moment with this issue, her heart's in the right place, but I don't think she's got the faintest idea of what she's getting herself into. As clever as she sounds when she's kind of barking back to Hisdar, let me tell you your case, I know it off by heart. I think she's struggling to get her head around what all of this means. If she's wondering why don't they love me? Why don't they trust me? Yeah. Why isn't everyone going, oh my God, Daenerys is here, wonderful? And it's difficult to read some of that.
Yeah, I mean, the things that I who said it? Sunny, hi Sunny, said that this chapter is just setting the scene and introducing characters, and it is, I think, tedious is probably the wrong word. It's just kind of overwhelming to kind of refamiliarize yourself with so many characters that are really only relevant for Dany in this storyline. And if it's overwhelming for me as a reader who's read this now a couple of times, it's definitely overwhelming for Dany in this situation, that's for sure. I think the things that I really liked in this chapter were, again, her handmaids warning her. They're like old Nan around her. They seem to have elements of truth in what they're saying. It's bad luck to touch the dead, and unless you kill them. So it made me wonder, Dany touching her dead Unsullied and the first soldier she's lost, which is kind of impressive. It made me wonder, is that going to come back to her later? We also find that the price of flesh has grown deeper in the brothels, because the brothels have been coming, are kind of sprouting around Meereen because of the war, and it made me think of the price of flesh will probably go up after the war in Westeros because there'll be just fewer people around. Hey Johnny, how are you?
Hi Johnny.
My biggest question here is the worth of the Unsullied as soldiers. So they clearly they're very damaged emotionally. Again, going back to your point of, you can't just, slavery is bad. Let's just preface everything, slavery is bad, okay? But you can't just free an army like that, give them free will out of nowhere without easing them into like how to interact with people. So they're this idea that they don't know what to do with their newfound freedom emotionally even is kind of very dangerous. And also they can't play detective when she needs them to. She sent away the Storm Crows and the second company, the
Second Sons.
The Second Sons. And like this Unsullied are great for protection, but armies do more than that, you know. Armies also help populations transition. When you go in and conquer, you gotta like we're reading The Kite Runner at the moment, and there's a scene with a Russian soldier, and he's attempting to speak Farsi when they take over Afghanistan because he doesn't want to be like another Russian soldier in the story who's just like a brute and wants to rape and pillage. He wants, like, he knows that this is a problem. It's easier if you try and transition. If you're the conqueror, it's easier if you try and transition, but the Unsullied can't do that. They're not capable of it. And it makes me worried for her dependence on them as an army, because the Dothraki the other way. They're the opposite. They're wild.
Well, it's interesting that described when he was found in a brothel, and again you get that scene in the TV show, and they're described as still having, the Unsullied still have a man's heart. So it means that they still have emotion. They have emotions and feelings, but just what to do with that. And I suppose they're just like young boys, I guess, really. Again, this issue of marriage being a powerful weapon emerges again here. I mean, it's there, isn't it? It's there all the way through marriage alliances and strengthening houses and power bases, and it's there in Westeros, and it's here in Essos as well. And it would solve half of the world's problems, both east and west, if somebody just came along and said, you know what, marriage is outlawed completely. It's now, we're just taking away the political clout completely from this, as you're weaponizing marriage. It's happening. It's there. It's just as powerful in Meereen when she's thinking about, I should have married Aegon, I should be thinking about marrying Aegon, and then later on she thinks she's considering about marrying Hisdar. But yeah, it's
unfortunate because we've never had a man in a similar position as a POV, because Jon can't marry, but we've never had a man in our books in that position.
Yeah,
where he's like, we were never inside Rob's head, for instance. We know that he had to marry a Frey and all that kind of thing, but in terms of it constantly being something that plays on their mind, like Dany has to think about it so much.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is it because she's a woman that's why she has to think about it so much? Because we don't know. Like, we don't know if Rob had to think about it or thought about it as much as Dany. Like, he had his own battles to literally win. But she's been thinking about it all her life.
She has, and we get to find out a bit more about that in another in a Tyrion chapter, the Illyrio story. But it strengthens the power base, but there is a part of me that's like, you're queen, you can marry who you want, you don't have you. But you know, again, that would be me being just as naive as Dany's being a queen. But
I wonder, Skahaz, who Barristan is a bit wary of, but I wonder, will he actually? I know in the show it was a bit different, but I wonder, will Dany actually leave him in charge of the East when she goes west?
Yeah, maybe.
Like, might be the one that might be left behind. I also my only question really at the end of this is the dragons having a taste for children and what that might mean for Westeros later. Is this foreshadowing that Dany will have to feed some children or somebody's children? I know we've also had that in the show, but will she literally have to feed even younger than we think? Is there going to be some, if she has to punish somebody, for instance, you know? Will
brutal.
It is pretty brutal, yeah. But they've obviously, I feel like once they have a taste for it, they'll never not have a taste for it, right?
I mean, and this is the black one. This is Viserys, so
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just him out of the three that gets a taste for it. But
maybe he's the only one, yeah. So yeah, anything else for Dany?
Just, I mean, I was a little bit confused that the Sons of the Harpy, it's alluded that they're kind of linked to the families, the rich slavers' families in Meereen, yet the actual Sons of the Harpy who are going around doing the murdering and what have you are described by Skahaz as he says that the Sons of the Harpy are low-born scum, and it's like, how are they low-born scum, but yet they're also linked? I don't know. Maybe the masters have employed low-born scum to kind of carry out their work, but I don't know. It just seemed to be a bit. Didn't seem to fit.
Maybe that's why Barristan doesn't trust him. Maybe he knows something he shouldn't. Maybe that was a slip.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. But yes, I agree with who was it who said it? Sunny. This chapter is setting the scene up for characters in Meereen, and obviously we get this complicated Meereenese knot that we will try to unravel later on in the book.
Oh man, okay.
So yeah, Jon.
My head hurt already. Yeah, Jon. Okay, yeah, Jon. So we start off with him warging Ghost, and he's aware of the other living direwolves. Do they have a telepathic connection, the direwolves? And does that mean that they're not limited by the wall? Like they're not blocked off by the magic of the wall? The direwolves now.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, there was something actually in the prologue in Varamyr's chapter when he describes being a wolf and running with the wolves, that he can see through the wolf's eyes, but also the other wolf's eyes as well. So it's kind of like he inhabits. Yeah, he inhabits the wolf, but also the other animal. He can see through the eyes of the other animals around him.
So the reason I'm asking this makes me wonder, as whites later on, if we're both whites, will I be able to see what you're doing and you'll be able to see what I'm doing?
Yes. Right, I think it's all like one big connection of somebody's bending the will collectively.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you think the wolves their wills are being, because my understanding is that they're just in sync with one another. The direwolves.
Yeah. I'm just going back to the very early chapters in Game of Thrones. Yeah. It did feel as though Summer and Shaggy Dog didn't want to be in the castle. They wanted to be out of there and free, and there was almost this fear that there was a connection there between the human, but it's kind of like they didn't want it to exist. It was there, but they didn't really.
Wasn't there something? Didn't they howl when Lady was killed or something?
Yeah.
Maybe I made that up. So what did I write down here? anyway, do you have anything for this? I'll try and read my writing.
Well, there's quite a bit of stuff that I mean, these are the chapters that get a bit confusing, because at the beginning of Jon is now Lord Commander, and it's the beginning of winter, just to set the scene. And we've just been reading in Feast what's been happening to Sam on his way to Braavos, but in Dance, he's still here at the Wall, which is, so there's obviously a bit of a time skip there that you've got to get your head round. And of course, Maester Aemon is still alive and still at the Wall. So he's imparting lots of wisdom to Jon before he leaves, and he talks about, there's two things that he says of note really in this chapter. One is that there's power in a king's blood, so he's aware of that, and the other one is about kill the boy, which is in one of the other chapters. But and he gives him a book as well. But there's lots of stuff that Maester Aemon does. At the beginning of this chapter, when he's dreaming about Ghost, and he's dreaming about he kind of wakes up and he starts thinking about his brothers, about Bran and Rickon, who he believes are dead. And he thinks about, there's a massive foreshadowing moment here where Jon thinks about whether or not Bran and Rickon can somehow still live on, if their spirits can somehow still live on in their direwolves, which would provide him with a connection there, because when he walks Ghost has that connection to Summer and to Shaggy Dog. That's huge foreshadowing that Jon is eventually going to can live on inside his wolf.
So this, that's what I have written down here. Could White Jon, resurrected Jon, attempt to go north to find Bran if he realizes when he's in Ghost that he can sense where Summer is?
Yeah.
So I mean, we have this idea that, you know, Jon will automatically go to Winterfell, but maybe not. Maybe he'll try and attempt to go north. Maybe he'll try and go get after Bran. Yeah,
to connect with. He could, especially if it depends if he stays in Ghost for a long time, and then Ghost becomes the dominant personality and just wants to go and link up with Summer, especially if Summer's in trouble.
Yeah. Absolutely. Or, you know, because Bran, I feel like if Bran is going to get out of there, and I know a lot of people think he won't, but if Bran is going to get out of there and something happens to Summer, I feel like it'll have to be Ghost that'll go for him. He'll need Ghost. They'll just need a direwolf to get out of there.
Yeah.
They won't be able to. I don't know. So it's kind of funny that Stannis has now become the Beggar King.
Yes, that's true. Very true.
It's
just
like it's come full circle from the series. And yeah, no, it's kind of pathetic, really. And I wondered, had Stannis, I think Jon is in danger either way, whether Stannis leaves or not. I think Jon is in danger either way, because I feel like a very kind of Henry II thing could happen here with Jon and Stannis, where Stannis could just declare some night, will nobody rid me of this turbulent Lord Commander, and somebody gets it in their head, do you know what, let's just get rid of him. And
yeah.
Like, it feels like he's on the verge of ordering, accidentally on purpose, Jon's death, or at least, you know, fanning the flames there. So yeah, there's just a lot of stuff with when he's warging about, in the dream that he's having, about the moon talking to him. And the moon murmurs at first, and then it insists, and then it cackles at him, saying snow, 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 and then the raven wakes him up. But I wondered, was the moon referring to Dany? And was that, like, because I still, even though it's a legend and it's not real and all that, I feel like we might be getting set up for a Nissa moment with Dany and Jon.
Moon and
just
stars.
that, like, murmuring, insisting, cackling that cackling. Oh, now she's like a white or something.
Yeah.
It's like there's the, I don't know. It's something that
oh, that's interesting.
yeah. And then the raven waking him up as if the raven knows you're having a dream you shouldn't be having.
Yeah, it's some of these dreams are really trippy. I obviously made completely different notes about this chapter because, like, again, I had the same question that I had with the Dany chapter: is Jon making the right decisions? Is he sending the right messages? And when it comes to his, I mean, Stannis, God, he's just won this huge, victorious battle at the Wall where he saved the Night's Watch. They really should be. I don't know. I kind of feel sorry for Stannis in that there should be this real jubilant post-battle moment for him. Whereas you're right, he is the beggar. He is the beggar king. He's. We get to know a little bit more. We get a bit more about what Stannis's take on things and his stance on things. Where Jon, they're talking about Gilly's baby, and Stannis says that he will not suffer the abomination.
Yeah.
And he also, I don't know. Does Stannis know that when later on, when Mance and what's he called?
Oh,
Rattleshirt.
Yeah.
And the glamoring and everything. Does Mance know that not Mance, does Stannis know that that's what's happened, or is this just a Melisandre thing? Because because according to what Stannis is saying in this chapter, that would be breaking his iron law. Stannis wouldn't go for that.
I don't think Stannis is. So Stannis makes it clear. I feel like Stannis isn't into magic. He doesn't mind religion. If it's called religion, it's different. I don't know if he's into the magical stuff. I don't know if he'd be into the whole glamoring trick.
No, I don't think. I don't think so either. He needs men, doesn't he? He needs to again build his power base. He can't do it with marriage, so he's using the Red Witch as much as he possibly can. But he's only got the Karstarks. That's it. He's struggling.
Well, there's that. I mean, I'm surprised more of the North hasn't gone to him. Is it because he's sitting on his hands, not really doing anything? Like he's been there for too long, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But also, this whole thing about him be like the child is an abomination, born of incest, all that kind of thing. Like prior to Robert's rebellion, Stannis was a staunch Targ loyalist. How much of an abomination can incest be to staunch Targ loyalists? Aren't they all abominations then?
Yeah.
That didn't really make much sense to me.
Maybe it's different if it's Targaryen. Well, who knows? Yeah, maybe wildlings are just seen as something completely different.
Yeah.
Is Mel a wildling?
Oh, that's interesting. What makes you think that?
It's at the end of this chapter when she's kind of accompanying him after they've met with Stannis, and she kind of admits about her, she can't, that when she reads the fires, that sometimes she can be wrong. And she also describes the Wall as being one of the hinges of the world, which is quite scary, I think. She's there she's definitely led them there, and I think she's there for a reason. But she also, when she's talking about keep your wolf close, and she has these seen in the fires of ice and daggers and steel, this happens, she's setting out his betrayal, and we know that happens. But when she's saying keep your wolf close, and then she says, nothing, Jon Snow, which, the reader kind of goes, oh, that's what she called used to say to him. Ygritte used to say to him, but it just makes me wonder whether or not it's more basic than that, and it's just a saying that the wildlings say. And
Tormund Tormund says it a couple of times, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know nothing, Jon Snow. Is she saying that because I don't think her powers are that clever enough to know that Ygritte would have said that to him and that that's going to have an impact on him. So I just wonder whether or not originally she was a wildling sold from.
It could already be that she's. It could be that, but it could already be that she's been talking to Mance and planning things with Mance, and that Mance has said this is something Ygritte says a lot to him, or something like that. That's something that he has picked up from her. I'm not sure though. The idea that she's been sold, that's quite an interesting one. The thing that I picked up with, I'm not entirely sure. Oh, Meridian says Stannis doesn't seem to have a problem with shadow babies. Yeah, I think if he can label magic as religion, he's okay with it. He doesn't have a problem with it. So yeah, I agree with you, Meridian. So that's an interesting idea. She might have been sold from a wildling.
Yeah, from what's it called? The place where they had in the TV show where they had the big battle.
Hardhome.
Yeah, maybe she was from Hardhome, sold into slavery from there across to Bravos, maybe. And
Jorah was dealing with wildlings, was he? Was he trying to sell wildlings?
Yeah. I don't know whether that was from like Bear Island, but it just made, I don't know, just made me think, it just made me wonder whether she could be. Yeah, and again, I'm not sure that Jon is sending out the right messages. I think he's settling into his position a little bit slower than Dany is, and differently, obviously. I always look at the parallels between the two of them, Jon and Dany. More as kind of siblings almost than like potential, king and queen.
So I think it's also really significant that Jon wakes up at the beginning of this book, because he won't be awake at the end of it. But there's something that happens here and in the Varamyr chapter. As they're warging, they describe the wind sighing. And I had a whole conversation about this with Ivan. He's out there. And we had a whole conversation about whether this is a common thing to do, to personify the wind sighing as if they're being watched. Is that a common? I don't know if I've ever really paid attention to it before. This idea that the wind is almost watching them, or it's like an emotional response to what they're doing, or I don't know. Is this like Bloodraven? Is this what we're supposed to be thinking of at this stage?
I suppose so. If we get that little snippet that we mentioned about when Varamyr dies, and the feeling, the sensation that he gets of going in, he can see he's part of everything. He sees everything. So maybe there are those little moments where somebody is seeing something.
Yeah, it's just when it was in both chapters and they both had warging at the beginning, and it's at the beginning, just something that I hadn't really paid attention to before. Meridian says Jorah was trying to sell poachers.
Oh, right.
But yeah, so Jon is in a tricky situation with Stannis. And, I want to know more about the Ravens.
Yeah,
like a heavy sigh, Connie. It's a sigh, like denotes emotion for me. So I don't think it's a common phrase to say about the wind sighing. Wind doesn't sigh anyway, right?
It's interesting. Yeah, it's a weird description,
and it happens twice in those two chapters with the warging. So just something, probably nothing to it. But so anything else for Jon?
Nope.
So we're into Bran.
Cool.
Coldhands.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Coldhands.
Well, let me start. Let me
Yeah,
start by asking you a couple of questions.
Okay.
First one is there any significance, do you think, to them having these swords from the crypts of Winterfell?
Yes, definitely.
Do you think it's providing them with some kind of magical protection? Is it identifying them with somebody? Does it mean that it leaves those spirits exposed? I mean, obviously it does, but it's mentioned a few times that Hodor has this, because they're more like ornamental swords, aren't they? You can't really fight. You can't. I mean, I suppose you could do a bit of damage, but they're not like honed for battle weapons.
Yeah, and they're grand in the north, where they'd be better than anything the wildlings have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure if it's good for them or bad for the spirits in the crypts.
Yeah, but there's definitely some significance there. I think we just need to try and figure out what that is. Maybe later on or in the next book.
I think I mentioned it last week in Geek's video on the army of Starks that's underground in the crypts.
Oh, yes, I'll have to go and have a look at that. Is that one of his travel guides?
I think it might be just called the Winterfell Crypts. I think
right.
That's what it's called.
I'll check it out. If it's a recent one, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
My other question is, what's weakening Jojen?
Yeah, I actually had that for Jojen as well.
He's deteriorating rapidly. But there isn't really a reason why. I mean, they're all suffering the same amount of hunger and exposure to the cold. And
so Jojen was sick to begin with, or was that just in the show? I don't remember him having.
He wasn't sick when they first arrived at Winterfell. He was fine. There was nothing wrong with him.
He has fits and stuff, right?
I can't remember.
So my question is,
I clearly don't pay attention to sick children.
This is why we're not mothers, Claire. You never told. Oh no, you did tell them about. Oh God, this week is just melding into one. You never told them about Marwyn. Yes, that's how I know. You told us last week. Is he still going up and down the stairs?
Oh yeah, on his own now. Yeah.
Anyway, getting back to Jojen. I'm more concerned with Marwyn's health.
Something's weakening him, and it's only getting worse the closer they're getting to where they need to be.
Is he losing the will to live? Is it like?
I mean, he said he sees the day that he dies. I mean, in the TV show, that was a shit show for me, to be honest with you, with the whole magical fireballs with the children.
About this during the week. If I was just a fan of the show and had never read the books, by the end, going into season 8, I'd be kind of like, what is the point of this Bran storyline?
Yeah.
It's kind of pointless in the TV show, right? Apart from the reveal, there's nothing. Like, it doesn't really tie in with anything else.
Yeah, there's the big Hodor reveal, but
well, I mean, in terms of what's the point of Bran's journey just for that bit of information? It seems a little bit pointless. That if I was a show watcher only, I feel like Bran's storyline has been. It just dawned on me during the week reading this. It's like, God, this is so interesting. I've really missed Bran, and then I was just like, in the show, this is kind of pointless.
Yeah,
there's nothing really here apart to from in the show they do make Coldhands Benjen, but I think it's clear it's not, but I can still see why people think it is. I know George has kind of confirmed in an editor's book that it isn't, but he might change his mind. I don't know. But who do you think Coldhands is?
I think Coldhands is somebody that Bran has created. Right. Because at the end, and a lot of people, I remember LaDonna talking about this years ago, I'm your monster, Brandon Stark, could mean I'm your monster, Brandon Stark, as in that's who I am. But it could also mean,
I just had a thought.
I'm your monster because you created me. I was born of you. I'm your monster. You're my Frankenstein kind of thing. You know, you created me, which begs the question, how did Bran create Coldhands? And I think that this is where we had that, like, oh yeah, there's going to be 3 things that happen in the TV show that definitely happen in the books, and one of them is Hodor. I think that maybe this is a slight variation of that, and it isn't Hodor, it's this other person that Bran has created who becomes Coldhands eventually. I think we will get to find out who Coldhands is later on, and it may be Coldhands is Jojen. I'm just
I was thinking that as well, but he'd have to be older, right? Maybe not though. I wonder, is it Waymar Royce?
It could be, yeah, could be.
That would be.
He's
brilliant.
he's definitely dead, because he admits in this chapter that he's dead, and that obviously bloody terrifies the kids. Mira is really doesn't trust Coldhands, and Jojen's like, well, you know, we're just going to have to go roll with this and go with him, because if we don't, we die. It's somebody who just that's the first time I've read that quote any differently to how I've ever read it before. I'm your monster, Brandon Stark. It isn't him saying that he's some time traveling Bran, you know, that he is Bran, or that he's a variation of a Bran or whatever. I think there is some element of the TV Hodor thing in here, but it's Coldhands, not Hodor, and that Bran has somehow created this person who's trapped in between 2 states. So he's dead. I don't know whether he ever was a man of the Night's Watch.
Has Bran met anyone? I think he had to have been a man of the Night's Watch, because he goes off to kill the foes, and we know that, I think we find out later on, they're men of the Night's Watch that were mutinying at Craster's Keep, right? Because I thought it was whites, and I was like, oh no, I think this is the Night's Watch guys at Craster's Keep. So that seems to me that he's punishing them for what they did to Mormont. And for me, that suggests that it might be someone like a Waymar Royce character.
Yeah, maybe.
But I don't know how that would work. If, I don't know, did Bran do this accidentally through Summer? I don't know. This is it's strange, that one. It is interesting that it's Mira that recognizes all the red flags with this guy.
Yeah,
she's recognizing that he's not eating, that he won't. She doesn't trust him at all, and that made me wonder what will happen with Mira later when she realizes what Bran is becoming, or lots of chat in the.
This is the chapter where Bran just seems to casually slip into Hodor, who shivers when it happens. Oh God, it's just so awful, really, to think about it when you think again back to the prologue with Thistle, how she reacted to it. And Hodor's this kind of like, I'm a servant, but at the same time, this is making me feel horrible and uncomfortable. Not only that, he's frightened. Bran says that he can taste Hodor's fear. It's so abusive when he does this, and it's only I didn't really think about this the first few reads of this, which I feel really bad about now, actually. But when I listen to, if it's the audio version, the description of this, it's just horribly abusive. There are ravens everywhere as well, which makes everything a million times creepier. So obviously the three-eyed crow is watching them, their journey and their arrival. Just
in the chat, people are saying, Meridian says, I think he knows about Jon's past, and he totally lost the will to live. Oh, Jojen knows about the past and totally lost the will to live. Jojen, is it Jojen who tells Bran that he's not the one who should be afraid? Can't remember. I'm not sure. And Connie wonders, is it Brandon from the past? Coldhands. Sunny says, I think Coldhands is another type of being that lives halfway between the others and the whites and the children. And Connie says that the children, Leaf later on says, they killed him long ago. And Connie says he's wearing Hodor like a coat, like Bolton wearing a Stark skin. Yeah, and Connie, sorry, I think I missed your comment earlier about Bolton's wanting to have that warging ability, but it's just not in their bloodline. So that's one of the reasons why they hate the Starks.
And that's why they flay, isn't it? Because it's like their version of taking somebody's skin.
I don't know who Coldhands is. I assume we'll probably get an answer in Wins, hopefully. Hopefully it's not something that will be left on a cliffhanger with. Of course, the big thing in this chapter is Bran not just slipping into Hodor, but Bran very comfortably eating men's flesh now through summer. That's a big, big problem.
And killing another wolf. Well, basically killing Sixskins, I imagine.
Yeah. Which is that the first time then that somebody hasn't died in the prologue?
Well, Thistle died.
Sorry, the POV hasn't died in the prologue.
Yeah. Oh gosh, hang on.
I know. What's his name? Pigface comes back.
Yeah, and Crescent dies.
Crescent dies.
Who's the other one?
I completely blanked now, but the other Night's Watch guy dies. In A Game of Thrones.
Oh, maybe.
Storm. Who's Storm?
Storm was... Yeah, there's somebody missing, isn't there?
Sorry, guys, can you help us out?
Yeah, so we've got... If we start at the beginning, we've got Royce.
Well, yeah, the guy who's with Royce. It's not Royce's POV.
Yeah.
Then
we've got Crescent. Then we've got... It must be another wildling one.
Another wildling one. It's the guy.
It's the mutiny.
Yes, it's the mutiny at Craster's Keep. Yeah, he dies.
He dies. Yeah.
But is he whited later?
It's Small Paul.
Yeah.
Well,
Small Paul is whited, but he's not the POV, right? Or is he? God, Claire, we just did this.
I know. No, I think he does. I think they all do, apart from this one.
Yeah.
And then obviously he dies in this chapter.
Although the Night's Watch guy in the prologue Game of Thrones is probably a white now. The Night's Watch guy in the Night's Watch guy in Storm, he is whited.
Yeah.
Pate comes back through Faceless Man. Varamyr, it lives out a second life through the wolf. So Crescent is the only one who doesn't come back. Like, isn't like resurrected, if you like.
Yeah.
They all end up dying. But Crescent, so maybe that suggests that there's something out there of Crescent's. Maybe there's a letter that he has sent to somebody to warn of Mel, or maybe. They all seem to have lived on a little bit.
Yeah, they do, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, Varamyr's body dies for sure, but Varamyr himself doesn't die. It's the first time that somebody's consciousness has lived beyond the POV. So Chet. Is it Chet?
Chet, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Connie. So we get a description here of Bloodraven as a friend, a wizard, a dreamer, the last Greenseer. So who is he a friend to? What does he conjure as a wizard? What kind of dreams is he actually sending? Is it the dreamer, as in like we say, I'm a teacher, I teach. A dreamer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you dream. It also means that you might create dreams, right? Like a dream maker, almost. So does he, when he sends dreams, is he dreaming through that other person as well? Do you know what I mean? And the last Green Seer. So what does that mean for Bran then?
Well, friend of who? Again, it depends on your perspective. I am beginning to think that what Bran is doing in this chapter, quite casually, all these things that Haggard described as an absolute abomination, Bran's doing left, right, and centre without any regard or seemingly consequence at this stage. And yet Coldhands describes the three-eyed raven as possibly as Bran's friend, which is quite scary and sinister, especially if Bran ends up being a bit of a bad guy. Wizard is interesting. Maybe
Wizard
that's got
really interesting. Is this the only time this word is used? I feel like this isn't a word that gets thrown around very much.
No, it isn't. In the TV show, Sam Gilly describes Sam as a wizard because
it seems very off in this world.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You don't really do kind of wizards as such. Like it's maesters and...
Well, you get Red Witch again, juxtaposition between the ice and fire and the, you know, the red god and the ice gods or the ice magic. We get red, you know, the Red Witch.
Yeah.
Maybe we get a white wizard. Who knows? Sounds a bit Ku Klux Klan, doesn't it? But
yeah.
Who knows? I'm just, the main thing that I got from this is that Coldhands potentially could be somebody that Bran has created. And of course, that's why he would be there when Bran arrived. You know, if it's that like time traveling thing, right, I'm going to be coming through the wall at this point. This will be the first time I ever go beyond the wall. I need you to be there when I'm on the, you know, you've got to be there as soon as I get through the wall. I'm going to need a guide and you're going to have to be the one to be there.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like that's happened.
Made me wonder, is there any possibility it could be Jon in some way?
Yeah.
Because the way he goes off to kill the other guys, that's very... it's retribution. It doesn't seem like there's much of a point to what he's doing. Just to punish them for what they did at Craster's Keep. It isn't Jon, but whoever it is, it's just, yeah. So then we are on to Tyrion 2, our last chapter.
Yes.
Smuggling Tyrion out of Pentos here, and Illyrio is being very evasive and eating snails and all that kind of thing. Bye, Meridian. Thank you so much for coming. Connie points out that the Ashai has the warlocks like in Karth, but they don't use wizard as a word. It really, for some reason, it jumped out at me. Barbara says, I like the idea of prologue characters coming back as something, and I really loved Master Crescent, so I'll pretend he's now a white raven.
Oh, yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, I like that, Barbara. So Illyrio is being gross. He's almost a cartoon symbol of greed, I feel. But Tyrion is just like, this guy is up to...
Can I just say, in the audio version, Roy Dotrice reads him like Michael Winner.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Doesn't he? Yeah. Like really, like exactly right.
Like a greasy eater.
Gross.
Yeah.
So gross. It's just so funny because he's eating roast chestnuts and then Tyrion looks around and he's eating snails. It's like, what the hell? Yeah. And Tyrion is like, if I keep eating like this.
So they are leaving Illyrio's manse and they are in this luxury litter on the way to, we still don't quite know where yet. So in a way, Tyrion is kind of being held hostage. You know,
he has no choice.
They're not going to let him escape this situation, but it's all being done in luxury. So the big thing that jumps out for me here at the beginning of the chapter, when Illyrio is spinning some yarn to Tyrion, and Tyrion can see that there's more to what Illyrio's giving him. So Illyrio talks about his history again with Varys and how they know each other, and also he talks about the Targaryen children, Viserys and Daenerys, when they were there living at his manse. And he says, when he's describing the characters, the children's characters, he says, Viserys was the Mad King's son. Daenerys is quite different.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, of course, you look at that and go, he's describing their personalities as being similar to Aegon, the Mad King, or not. You know, it's the flip of the coin. But it could also be outright saying Viserys was the Mad King's son, Daenerys not. She was a very different matter. Yet he describes Daenerys later on in this chapter as a true Targaryen. So if Daenerys is Targaryen, but she's not the Mad King's daughter, then she's got to be Rhaegar's. So
this is what I wonder, because for Rhaegar's 3 heads of the dragon, Lyanna should have had a girl, because he's calling his children after all of this. Is something that in Deep Geek kind of mentioned in passing and something, and I was like,
Aegon and his 2 sisters.
Yeah, he's calling them after Aegon and the 2 sisters. So she could be Visenya. Potentially. Because I don't know, like in the show they call Jon Aegon, but why would Rhaegar call both his sons Aegon?
Yeah, I know, that makes no sense.
I don't think that's going to happen in the book.
Well, it doesn't. It did. Do they mention in the TV show? Yeah, they do, don't they?
They do. Yeah, he's called Aegon. Yeah,
it's so weird.
I don't know why that happens. Sonny says, I've always wondered why Varys and Illyrio favor Aegon but not Dany. They favor one Targ over the other. The thing is, if Aegon is Aegon and not Fagon, which I think there's overwhelming evidence to suggest that he is not Aegon. But let's say he is Aegon, or they have to pass him off as Aegon. The best way to do that is to marry Aegon to his sister Dany, because that's what Targs did, right?
Yeah.
They married sister and brother.
Yeah.
So for them, it works if Dany is actually Aegon's sister. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
But
they want, it seems to me that they want that Aegon is a Blackfire. There's a whole load of stuff around the Golden Company waiting for the Queen in Volantis to come so that they can, take her from the east to the west. They're all Blackfire descendants in the Golden Company. They're all exiles, and all they want to do is go back to Westeros. They dream of it. There's a pretty old theory that this Sarah, who was Illyrio's wife, was also a Blackfire, because of what she looks like, Targaryen features, and he also says, Illyrio says, that he trusts Griff like he would trust a brother. And that the contracts with because Tyrion's like, hang on a minute, how do you, I know you make a lot of money, but it really enough to kind of make the Golden Company turn the cloaks, because they're renowned as being, like the best sellsword company. And he says that, and Illyrio's answer is that some contracts are written in gold and some are written in blood, which means that Illyrio has a connection to the Golden Company. The Golden Company are Blackfire descendants. There seemed to be clues that Sarah was a Blackfire. Therefore, Fagon is Sarah and Illyrio's son, and he has Blackfire blood. and that's what they're doing desperately, trying to kind of grasping for power to get it. This is his and Varys's plan all along, which kind of would make sense.
Sonny wonders, yes, why do they marry her to Drogo and not keep her for Aegon? So this is the biggest kind of, like, this is the thing that I don't really, I definitely think they sent Viserys with her, knowing that Viserys would end up being killed by Drogon, like by Drogo. I think they knew.
There's some safe bets that they've made, I think, there. Yeah.
But the thing is, with Drogo, cleverly, Drogo didn't speak the common tongue very well. So we don't really know how lasting that relationship was meant to be for either side of the contract. Maybe Drogo didn't plan on falling in love with Dany. Maybe there was an arrangement that he was just to keep them away. Or maybe they did want to take them out. I don't know. There's something, I feel, even with the Blackfire plot, there's something not quite right with sending Dany. I agree with you, Sonny, with sending Dany away and not keeping that Targ line an option for them, because they still need her. And it feels like they definitely sent her with dragon eggs for her to hatch those dragon eggs as well. Yeah. What did you think about his story that Viserys tried to rape Dany? Do you believe that? I don't believe that. Viserys found her very unattractive.
Yes.
And I know rape is about a power thing. I know that. But I don't know if I believe, as bad as Viserys was, I don't know if he would have risked pissing off Drogo, because he needed him. He needed the Dothraki.
He did. I mean, he kind of changed his mind on that a little bit later on when he was too impatient and he couldn't wait. But I don't think he did. I don't think he would have done that. I don't think he was brave enough to even try to do that, even if that's what he wanted to do. But
I just wondered about what's the point of
telling that story.
What's the point of telling that story?
Not sure.
I don't know. Everything Illyria says, it just there's something about Illyria, though. I think a point, as I was saying to Ivan earlier on, I've just diagnosed Illyrio. There's a line where Tyrion says he eats like an elephant, but he pisses like he has a bladder the size of a peanut. So that suggests to me that he has diabetes. So perhaps he's very ill all the time. So Illyrio might be, I mean, he's like, I wouldn't be surprised if he had diabetes, but yeah, it's just something that there's an urgency in their plot now, maybe because of the way things are going in Westeros, that it sounds to me like he's going to get careless.
Yeah.
Illyrio, like there's scope for them to get careless. Like the plot with sending Dany away with Drogo, potentially for years, right? And that doesn't work out. And it's like, oh shit. Okay. All right. We'll have to speed it up in other ways. It's kind of like with Littlefinger and Cersei at the end of Feast, that Cersei's actions don't give Littlefinger enough time to plant seeds. I feel the same is happening here with Illyrio. And Tyrion can't quite put his finger on it either. There's something else driving him.
Well, I think Illyrio is crafting a narrative that he wants Tyrion to swallow. He knows that because Varys has said, look, this isn't someone who's stupid. He is, he can think for himself. So we're going to have to plant lots of little things in there that aren't that obvious, but that we're allowing him to chew on over himself, later on dream about it, blah, 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 whatever, and then come to his own conclusion.
Connor says Illyrio slept with the Lycian girl, slave girl, because he couldn't do Daenerys. Ugh, gross. Yeah, and also he keeps Sarah's hands in a box. That's so creepy.
Yeah.
Is there something? Is there something with her hands that proves the Blackfire connection?
I don't know. Maybe.
Some weird like congenital problem that we'll find out about later.
It's funny, like, her hands were so soft. maybe they're actually like full of grayscale or something. Who knows? Like the complete opposite.
It's a very strange thing to do, to keep hands.
Yeah.
And Connie says they thought they'd never withstand the Dothraki sea. I feel like there was a rescue plan there for Dany all the time. Dany has always had people around her.
Yeah.
Able to take her out. It's kind of when Jon gets to the wall, he's got Mormont, he's got Benjen, he's got Aemon. There seems to be, people around them that know more than they're letting out. Or I don't know. A really interesting thing which I completely missed the first time. Tyrion wakes up with a massive hangover, and it's his first time on a Valyrian road. It kind of reminds me when we were younger, and people would say that, if anyone went north to Northern Ireland, they've great roads, because they're part of the UK and the Republic of Ireland isn't. So when we were growing up, all our roads were full of potholes.
Oh, I know.
And you had better roads. So if you went over the border, it was a big deal. Oh, you're on good roads. It kind of reminded me that the Valyrian roads. FYI, it's the opposite way now because we get lots more EU money.
Yeah.
So now the roads are actually better in the Republic.
No more demon roads.
No more demon roads. Well, yeah, no, it's much better. But yeah, it kind of sets him on this spiral of thinking, which unfortunately he's too hungover to kind of
yes,
out.
But it works. It does work because he has that dream, and basically he dreams that he's in battle, but he dreams that he's got two heads. And
well, actually, that wasn't what I was going to say.
Okay.
So what he thinks is that he says the Freehold's grasp had reached as far as Dragonstone, but never to the mainland of Westeros itself. And he thinks odd that Dragonstone is no more than a rock. The wealth was further west, but they had dragons. Surely they knew that was there.
Yeah.
So he's wondering, why did they come? Why stop at Dragonstone? When the Valyrians first came to Westeros, why stop at Dragonstone?
Yeah.
Why not keep going? Because they don't conquer, right, for a while.
No, they just land there, don't they? King's Landing.
The question overall is, why did the Valyrians not just conquer everywhere? Why did they ever stay in Valyria?
Yeah.
Why do they not go for? What is it about this? The reason I'm asking is a lot of the problems in Westeros over the last 3 centuries been kind of spiraling, building to an idea that perhaps part of this pact long ago is that Targaryen bloodlines or Valyrian bloodlines should never be allowed back into Westeros. Is that what this is all about? That there's a pact broken. Maybe we're not looking at this the right way. Maybe it's nothing to do with the First Men.
Yeah.
It's to do, because I've also been listening to a history podcast, and there was an episode about Hadrian's Wall, and Hadrian's Wall they think may not have been built necessarily for defense, but it may have just been a border, this is our land, this is your land kind of thing. So, and there was gates in it and things like that, so people could move through it.
Yeah.
So, and we know that the wall has been added to by the Night's Watch over centuries. So maybe it has nothing got to do with the people there. Maybe it's to do with these Targaryens, this hot fire magic breaking a pact. Maybe
it could be. I think it probably is something that we haven't thought about before. I think we're taking a lot.
Connie's saying that because slavery is outlawed. Probably, maybe.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say about his dream?
Just that he dreams he's in battle with 2 heads. To me, that means they've planted that seed. So Varys and Illyrio have planted those seeds because they need to determine where he's going to be in their game, how pliable Tyrion's going to be, or how much of a loose cannon he is. But it seems to be working, because in his dream, I think the fact that he dreams that he's got this battle with two heads means that he's in two minds about whether or not to betray his family, because that's what they're asking him to do. They're asking him to betray his family, and as we know, at the previous chapter, he's claiming I'm a Lannister. He's a Lannister through and through. But actually now he's starting to have dreams where he's got two heads, or he's in two minds about what he's going to do. So that it's working. It's working.
Yeah. Do I have anything else? I don't think I have anything else for this, actually. Just Varys and Illyria's past. I don't really buy much of it.
No, although I mean,
I think it's like half truth.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't believe that Illyrio's saying that he's vouching for Dany because he wants to be Master of Coin in Westeros. That's like, I don't think
you want to do any work.
That's a very low ambition for somebody like him to have. And I don't think he would want the job. Yeah. Also, he wouldn't want to do the work.
If he really wanted that kind of job, he could have just bought up the debt of Westeros. Like, he seems to have had enough money.
Yeah.
Connie says in the show Tyrion is in two minds right now. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's definitely excuse me. Illyrio's spinning a yarn in this chapter, definitely. All right, Marwyn. God, he just keeps jumping up at me and nearly knocking me off my chair. Hang on a minute.
So so we got through it, the 6 of them, Claire.
Yeah.
And next week we have The Merchant's Man to Dany 2, and then we're taking a break for a week. So the link to the live chat is down below, and the schedule and all that kind of thing. And Illyrio wants slavery back in Westeros, Connie thinks. Interesting.
Yeah, maybe. Could be. I mean, that would be more plausible, I think, in terms of what his ambitions might be, not to be Master of Coin. Like,
it just feels like he can't possibly get any fatter or any richer.
No.
But maybe he can. So chapter 6, chapter 11 next week.
Yeah, we've got a couple of chapters, and it's getting really interesting at the wall.
Yeah. So...
And Davos returns to us next week.
Davos. I'm so looking forward to Davos as well. He misorganized at it again. Yeah. Although we may change it up if because the 6 chapters this week were fine. They're kind of introductions, but we'll see how crazy it gets next week.
Yeah.
But I need to sleep a bit more this week as well, and sort out my internet problems. And then I won't be frazzled. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much, Claire.
No problem. See you next week. Bye.